Hello, my name is Professor Abhilash Nair. I'm the Director of Research and Enterprise here at the University of Southampton's Delhi campus. Research sits at the heart of everything we do as a university. We are a triple helix university, which means we embed research, knowledge exchange, and enterprise into everything we do. Our education, our activities are all informed by that ethos. Now, why do we do research? I think it's the fundamental duty of universities to undertake research for knowledge creation and not just create that knowledge, but also to apply that for the wider societal benefit in its application, to help solve some of the most pressing problems that we face in our society, in health, be it in crime, solving crimes, be it in climate, you name it, we have it. So, we have a roundtable on campus on a very topical issue, air pollution, and we are very privileged to host two of our most esteemed researchers at the University of Southampton, Professor Sabu Padmadas and Professor Craig Hutton. Welcome to you both to our Delhi campus. And we are part of the same community. We do work together quite a lot. But we're very helpful and useful for our audience here to hear about your thoughts on air pollution and why you're hosting this roundtable and everything else. But before that, let's do some introductions. I'll start with you, Professor Padmadas. You are the Executive Director of the India Centre at the University of Southampton. India Centre does not need much of an introduction, but for the benefit of our audience, would you tell us a little bit about yourself, but also the work you undertake at the centre?
Thank you, Professor Abhilash. I think it has been an absolute pleasure being with you. First of all, I'm a professor of demography and global health at the University of Southampton. I've been in the university for the last 25 years, long time, but also thankfully, I've been appointed as the executive director of the University India Centre. What the University India Centre does is actually, it's a living bridge that connects between Southampton and India, and particularly our campus has come as a wonderful entity in between. So I think our main task is actually to facilitate research for impact as well as education programs. So we do a wide range of activities, including student mobility, research programs, and so on. So the forthcoming this strategic roundtable on air pollution is one of the major tasks, and I think we want to really work with everyone here in Delhi campus and establish this as a kind of a promising research kind of opportunity, and we look forward to working with you.
Wonderful, thank you. Likewise, we very much look forward to working together on this very important topic. And I move on to you, Professor Craig Hutton. You are, of course, the director of the Sustainability and Resilience Institute, one of the leading institutes at the university. Again, very warm welcome to you. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself, your work, and also about your institute?
Thank you. Yeah, fantastic to be here. My first visit to the campus, thoroughly enjoying that. So yes, as you said, Craig Hutton, I'm Professor of Sustainability Science, so that sort of evidence base around all the things that we see as sustainability. Most of my work has been around large socio-ecological systems like deltas or big river systems. I've worked in India quite a lot on large river systems and looking at the impacts of climate change. That's sort of my particular research interest. As director of SRI, SRI is one of 4 strategic institutes at the university, and that means we are tasked with interdisciplinary research, trying to stimulate and facilitate research. And in our case, that's particularly around sustainability and resilience, and very much the idea that sustainability is environment and people. It must have a people component. It's not enough to just talk about carbon or just talk about social impact. It's about how those things intersect. And of course, air quality is one of those areas that impacts both people and the environment.
Yeah, thank you. And of course, Delhi, the national capital region, broadly, India as a country, Delhi as a city, we all grapple with problems relating to air pollution in its various manifestations. So it goes without saying that this roundtable is highly topical, very timely, and we're very grateful that you've given your time to put this together here on our campus. So maybe a starting point for me would be to get a better sense of why this roundtable now, why here? Can you sort of tell us something about what has prompted your thinking behind this?
Thank you, Professor Abhilash. So I think that's a very pertinent question. So often what we do is that we search for umbrella when there is rain. So here we want to really be better equipped. So air pollution is not just confined to Delhi; it's almost everywhere. Even the city of Southampton and London. There is air pollution. Perhaps, everyone knows that back in 1950s, I think early 50s, there was smoke. There was a big, dangerous smoke that literally trapped London, and where people were dying on a weekly basis. So I think the basic principle behind this is that nobody deserves to die of poor air or poor water. And clean air is very much a basic human right. And I think, it's our collective responsibility to make sure that, we work hard. I think as researchers, I think it's our moral responsibility to take action to this and to work not in isolation, but with the government and various stakeholders. I think, in fact, literally everyone in the community is a stakeholder, and we need to be cautious of that. And I think in the case of Delhi, particularly Delhi being a landlocked region, and the whole of Delhi NCR region being landlocked, and there are, if you look at, for instance, trucks coming from Rajasthan and Haryana to the capital city, as well as the vehicle population being sort of increasing, migration that's happening. So it's this quite a very complex problem, and it is not that we are actually proposing this as something very new. There's been huge amount of research that has already taken place within India by leading institutions like JNU, IIT Delhi and Terry University and so on. So what we are trying to do is that actually we are trying to find a platform where we can actually bring all the experts together so that we can address the problem from an interdisciplinary perspective or multidisciplinary perspective, and even a multi-sectoral perspective. So we need to really be having dialogues with the Ministry of Transport, the Ministry of Housing, Ministry of, you name it. I think literally we would like to work with everyone. So our aim is actually to collaborate and with the different stakeholders. When I say stakeholders, these are multiple stakeholders. They come from ministry, they come from industry, they come from academia, schools, colleges, you name it. I think we need a collective approach to solve this problem. Without addressing this problem in that kind of a coherent, concerted way, I think we are not going to solve this problem. And there are incredible number of experts in Delhi itself, who are working in the area. And at times we have felt that, they are working in silos. And I think so what this roundtable is going to do is actually to bring everyone together and to form a consortium and to really take the next steps, in the sense that I think we have to come up with some behavioral interventions, and we have to pilot test it, and we have to see that whether that resolves the problem. Because come September, I think we will have the same challenge in Delhi. And I think as a socially and as well as globally responsible university like Southampton, I think we are actually committed to work with local institutions, the government, and other industry stakeholders and NGOs as well to address this problem. But the question regarding why now we are talking about this, why it is now, is something that I'm sure that Professor Craig Hutton could actually perhaps reflect on this.
Absolutely. I'll take the points around stakeholders. This is really fundamental. But as we can imagine, air quality, and it's certainly true around the world, air quality poses an issue of complexity. And you mentioned complexity. And that's a word I really wanted to pull out, because you're asking why now? Because it is true, for many years, this problem has existed, and there have been many attempts at interventions. We have made, globally in an academic community, we've made substantial advances in understanding complexity and understanding how to model it and how to understand aspects of complexity. Systems thinking, it's sometimes called. Now, I think the time is right now to begin to think about how we apply that to what is an immensely complex system of air quality in Delhi. If you think of all the different populations, the migration of populations coming in, the multiple stakeholders and their perspectives, and then the physics of the atmosphere and the inputs. This is a real opportunity to think of this as a large, sometimes what we call a socio-ecological system. And that complexity is something that Southampton University excels in. We've done a lot of work in that field. It's an area of great interest to us, the integrative research approaches and looking at systems thinking. So I think Southampton and its partners here in Delhi have something to begin to bring to that, to create models and also to think about scenarios of how this might play out over the next 20 years. And what you're really aiming to do there is allow policymakers space to consider multiple policy approaches, to test on a platform, to test what they might think about doing. And I think that's something that is timely for us at the moment.
Of course, thank you. And of course, policy has to be informed by evidence, and that's what we provide as researchers. We inform policy making,
Yes,
good
indeed.
policy making,
Indeed, yeah.
supported by hard evidence. One thing I wanted to talk about is the health burden of air pollution. And I mean, generally there is a lot of narrative in the media about health hazards stemming from pollution. Could you perhaps shed some insights into the fairness problem in that? Depending on your socio-economic background, the impact of air pollution can vary depending on your status.
Very much so. It's an equity issue.
It's
exactly that. And I mean, if we, in a sort of simple way, think of the risk of poor air quality, well, there's a hazard that exists, and pretty much that exists for everyone because the air is distributed around. But exposure, who is actually being exposed, well, that does vary according to where you live, and often poorer people live in those sectors where industry might be, lots of trucks and lorries. And remember, this air quality is coming from dust, it's coming from industry, it's coming from traffic. So poorer people tend to live in those places that are more heavily exposed. They've got less access to buildings with air conditioning and potentially cleaner air. So there really is a strong bias that the poorer, more marginalized sectors of society are going to be more exposed. And then there's vulnerability. Those people who are exposed, if you're already ill, if you have comorbidities, you're going to suffer more. So in many ways, the poorer sectors of society have a strong bias against them to start with in the whole process. And I think that should be really quite fundamental in our thinking and in terms of our policy responses.
And more importantly, I think it affects not just the years of our life, like life expectancy, because in the theory of life expectancy, any small drop in life expectancy by 1 year would really would signal that, well, there's something wrong in the system. So here what we are saying is that globally there are about 10 million deaths directly attributed to pollution, and more recently we have evidence that even not just non-communicable diseases like heart conditions and cancers and respiratory diseases, but also increasingly dementia has come out. Mental health has come out as one of the biggest challenge. And think about school children. These are all school children who are inhaling bad air, and that affects their cognitive growth. And so there are long-term implications as well. And I think so. In that, collectively, I think there's no debate that there is clearly an impact of air pollution on health, and that's not just sometimes we say that, well, look, that's the air in the atmosphere and the environment, but it's not just that, but also indoor pollution. Indoor pollution is also creating challenges because also because of limited space. I think in the probably 50 years ago or even 20 years ago, we had sufficient space in our living environment, but now it's all constrained. The population has increased, and so there are these a kind of macro level changes that has affected. So air pollution has significant impact on human health. I mean, it's not only that it's affecting the years of life, but also it affects the quality of your life. And I think what we are actually looking at is that for India being a responsible global leader now, I think is trying to really enhance its economic productivity, national productivity. I think this is the time to really fix all these fundamental issues. I think if we get this right, then I think everything will follow. I think that's the kind of thought process behind it, and for which you would need a collective goals and collective actions. And in fact, there's no point in having blame games like pointing fingers. It's actually the idea is to actually bring everyone together to one table and take that collective responsibility, and also ensure some kind of accountability in the system.
Oh, thank you. So, yeah, that points to the need for evidence-based good policy making, that can serve its purpose. But what good is policy if it can't be enforced? Policy needs to be enforceable, workable, and be conscious of the hard realities that we live in. So with that in mind, what does a good policy making look like? I know the Roundtable has attracted several policymakers, which means we will be working with them, they'll be working with us. We can co-create knowledge, transfer skills, knowledge base and everything else. But in your mind, what does good policy making look like? How can the Roundtable, how can we as researchers, as a university contribute in supporting governmental goals in solving, trying to help solve this problem?
I think we perhaps need more evidence, there's sufficient evidence. A policy that we are talking about for resolving the air pollution crisis should be evidence-based and research-informed policies. And it's not that it's not there, it's already there. But I think what we have found is that the evidence tends to be mixed in some cases. And part of the reason is exactly what we discussed before, because of the complexity and uncertainty. Because every year you see the kind of intensity of air pollution varies based on climatic conditions, meteorological conditions, and so on. So we need evidence, but at the same time, we should not also ignore the efforts taken by, let's say, for instance, the CAQM, which is the Commission for Air Quality Management, and the Central Pollution Control Board, the Delhi Pollution Control Board. They're all doing excellent work in terms of monitoring. So monitoring these trends should be part and parcel of the whole process. But what we need is, alongside, we need to also kind of systematically evaluate the existing policies. Are they making a difference? For instance, one could think, for example, stubble burning in Haryana, for instance. I mean, it's a problem that's been well addressed. We have to also think from the perspective of the farmers and their needs and so on. And during Diwali, I mean, there has been interventions like green crackers and so on. It has worked for a while, but so you have to, I think, look at it from a wider lens to ensure that there is also behavioral change that we bring around, and for which I think inevitably and undoubtedly we need high quality research. We need what is known as a system based approach, or system approach to understand this complexity. And in fact, there has been a lot of work that Sustainability Resilience Institute has done. So perhaps Craig can actually reflect on this.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about the ideas of, what is it we can do? What are we doing here as universities and institutions? And I'm thinking here about, Southampton and our partners in Delhi, academic partners. I think within that framework, one thing we can offer is to develop programs of capacity building and training. And by this, I kind of, what's worked well, and I've seen in my own experience work well, is civil servants, agents of government and governance, taking up the opportunity to perhaps do something like a PhD, and to mold that PhD to the specific problems that we're seeing here. Now, the value for me of that is that this is career development. People are very interested in doing that, but we can really generate highly relevant research that is, we know, because this will be civil servants and the like doing this work, will be extremely well placed to consider the complexity of the governance system around air quality in this particular case. So at one level, we need to think, it's not us coming in and saying, you must do this. It's us saying, let us work with you and your team to develop the skills, which universities are very good at, to allow you to solve these problems because you understand them perhaps better than we do. So that's a good way of doing it. And the kinds of skills that we would be thinking of might be areas such as adaptive management, more flexible approaches, using ongoing evidence base to adapt what you do. And not many people do that, but it's very needed because when you have a complex system, things never, ever operate the way you think. If we try to go for predictable, okay, over the next 5 years, I'm going to try this, you will fail because systems are complex. Whereas if we develop, for example, adaptive management systems, that's where we're going to constantly sample what's going on, intervene and sample what's happening and modify our responses. Now, that's something universities have got good global examples of that we could be learning from, bringing in. And, at Southampton and other places, we have things like the Clean Air South, which is an organisation, okay, it's in the UK, but we've done a lot on how to intersect governance and private sector and other organisations. So my feeling is one of the things we can be doing alongside the specific research required is to develop strategies for joint training, capacity building, and capacity partnerships. And I think, we have the wherewithal to do that with the government here. And that's what I'm hoping will be part of our strategy.
I think, just adding to that, I think that very important observation is also, I think we should also engage young people, because I think the whole concept of sustainable development is the kind of development that meets the abilities of the current generation without compromising the needs of the future generation. So we need to educate them to make them more aware of the consequences of this air pollution, because in the long run they are going to be the victims of this pollution. So I think the universities could potentially do a great role by bringing students from schools and colleges together, actually to not only to generate awareness, but also they can do some small behavioral kind of changes. And those very, very small interventions could actually sometimes be very meaningful, and it can make a big difference at a scale. But also, I think, as Craig was mentioning, that the complexity is because it addresses or it involves people from across different social classes and even from different regions, geographies, and so on. So it is not an easy problem to fix, but at the same time, we have to do it, and the time is right now. And the problem, come September or come December, when the festive season starts, I think, it will be clear, present, and danger.
Yes. And what better way to start than hosting this roundtable? It's very topic here in Gurugram. Thank you both for your time and for your insights. Very much appreciated. As a Russell Group University, it is our mission to serve the communities that we exist in, be it helping to solve some of the most pressing societal problems, but also applying our knowledge base and research into finding practical solutions. And this is just one example of doing that, achieving that. And I'm really, really excited to host this strategic roundtable on air pollution here in Delhi. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you very much indeed again for your time and your effort in putting this together.
Thank you.
Thank you.